Hello and welcome to the Red Zone podcast, a tight end analysis. I'm Big Italy 42. He's Scott Mayoig at Sports 25 to Life, and we're talking about tight ends not named Rob Gronkowski. You can't roster him this week, so good luck trying. I wish I could, but he's on a bye week already.
I know. I almost had to take my own bye week because of it.
Yeah, I know. You just want to sit out if you can't play Gronk.
I know. That is how I feel at this point.
Yeah, it's a well-deserved week off for that Patriots offense that going to probably be pretty tired by the end of the season. I hate these early bye weeks already, but
Yeah.
Either way, I'm sure he's at making it rain somewhere, enjoying himself. But either way, the elite play, which was actually the top play from last week, if you had him, you did pretty well because he was so far ahead of every other tight end that it really wasn't even close. Greg Olsen for the Panthers. He's got a decent price tag across the industry. Bumped up a little bit from last week, of course, after that huge performance with 2 touchdowns. But, I mean, this one is just... It seems pretty simple. You know, the only thing really going against Greg Olsen here is that potential hurricane they're talking about with the Carolina-Philly game. Could end up delaying or, I guess, postponing that game until later. But obviously, all of that is something just to monitor throughout the week. It's only Thursday now. But if Greg Olsen plays, he's easily your top option again.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to rack up 10-plus targets pretty easily again. Cam looked better passing it last week. Much better, actually. He looked amazing last week after really struggling with his accuracy the first 2 weeks. I mean, if he's going to get 15 looks from a halfway decent throw in Cam Newton, I mean, he's the top option outside of Gronk every week. And on a week with no Gronk, he's my favorite option. So I really don't have any concerns there. It's not a huge over-under, only 39.5. So the team total for him, only 21.5 or so. That's not super concerning for me just because we know what the target volume is going to look like. If you weren't as sure of the target volume, you'd have to be a little bit more concerned there. But, I mean, he's stayed pretty low in price given that he's been racking up targets over the last 2 weeks thanks to his week 1 goose egg. I really I'm going to have a hard time playing anyone else. The other guy I like a ton is Travis Kelce. But, I mean, I like Olsen quite a bit more given what the Chiefs' offense has looked like lately.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been a rough go for Kelce after that first that breakout performance week 1. And I mean, obviously, this is still a scenario where we all think he should be more involved in the offense, and he obviously should be. But it's going to be a product of Alex Smith, and you know, it's not a bad matchup. I guess it's a middle road type of matchup. Bengals at above average defense, but below average against tight end over the last couple of years. But I guess the main thing that worries you a little bit here is that Bengals pass rush has been significantly improved, so Alex Smith with less time to throw. Maybe Kelce, they just keep him in the short passing game, just keep him ready to catch some passes from Captain Check down there. Alex Smith, who just hates throwing the ball down the field ever. Even now that he finally threw a touchdown to a wide receiver, now that that's out of the way, he probably doesn't have to throw another one for a year and a half, and we'll be good for the rest of the year, right?
Yeah, I mean, the frustrating part is they were trailing all week last week and still didn't get Kelce very involved. I mean, Macklin wasn't really even involved until that last drive. I mean, they were still running the ball a ton while they just watched Aaron Rodgers dissect them through the air. So, I mean, it's hard to feel great about him, even though I do feel like he's physically the best tight end playing this week. He's got a ton of upside, has a pretty decent downside. I mean, even in his poor games over the last 2 weeks, he's been okay in full PPR, so I don't mind it. Cincinnati's been pretty middle of the road against tight ends. I think they were like 17th in effectiveness allowed last year. They haven't been great so far this year. Cincinnati's been playing really well, and they should be winning this game, though. I believe this projected score is 24-20 Cincinnati, so hopefully that leads to some more passing for the Chiefs, and that gets Kelce more involved. But we've got to just keep an eye on that and hope that they keep getting him more involved, and Alex Smith starts playing a little bit better, because when he played well week 1, I mean, we saw how good Kelce was. When Alex Smith played pretty poorly weeks 2 and 3, we saw how much he struggled to rack up fantasy points. So it's really going to come down to how Alex Smith is playing. And I mean, because if they keep handing it to Jamal Charles, it's going to be hard to get targets when they're running the ball all the time.
Yeah, that's a really good point there. So keep him in mind. Obviously, he's a guy that looks like, I mean, he's mini Gronk, so you certainly want to consider that. Really not his problem when he's not getting involved. It's not like he's dropping passes or anything.
Yep.
And then next up, Charles Clay, who's been a popular target for Tyrod Taylor the last couple weeks. Has been having a couple nice games, touchdowns in back-to-back games now. We mentioned how bad this Giants defense has been at defending the pass, and Clay over his last 2 weeks, 8 catches, over 100 yards, those 2 touchdown grabs, and he's still cheap. Not a guy that sees a ton of volume, but we've seen this when he was with the Dolphins as well. He's a good go-to guy that has great hands. That when you need to complete a pass, you need to pick up a third down, or you're trying to maintain a drive, then he's the guy you can rely on to make the big catches for you.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, that's the biggest thing. I mean, like you said, we saw it with the Dolphins all the time. I mean, he's just a really consistent option. That's something Tyrod Taylor really needs. We mentioned Robert Woods and Percy Harvin. Harvin's not a guy that you're just going to feed the ball to PPR style. So, I mean, we're going to see a lot of short passes to Robert Woods and Charles Clay this week. So, both of those guys are going to be really important value plays, especially in lineups I'm playing with Tyrod Taylor, because, I mean, I really like Buffalo this week in general. I mean, we're not talking about running backs here, but Carlos Williams feels like a pretty good play. Miami's defense hasn't been good overall. I think the Bills are going to move the ball a ton with how efficient Tyrod Taylor's been, and these guys in the short passing game are going to be a huge part of that, especially with Sammy Watkins out.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, I keep ending up with way too many Bills in most of my cash game lineups, and I keep having to decide whether or not I feel good about that or not. So,
having the same problem.
Yeah, it's going to be a popular one this weekend. A guy who's been popular, especially as far as volume goes, Jordan Reed for the Redskins. I mean, Kirk Cousins hasn't been particularly good, but Jordan Reed has seen himself quite a few targets, as he always does. Seems like he's the top option in that offense. I mean, last 2 weeks, he's got 178 yards on 12 catches. Hasn't found the end zone, but seems like he gives you a really nice high floor, and he's a guy that you can rely on, to get some catches, whether he finds the end zone or not. That's the difference between he and some other tight ends is you got that nice floor. Not huge upside, but certainly a guy that you can look at it for some stability. And Deshaun Jackson, they said maybe he would come back this week. Doesn't look like he's going to.
No, it doesn't.
So, I mean, that certainly leaves Jordan Reed as the top option there for them.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, him and Garcon are going to hog all the targets in this game. You got to think, I mean, Philly's defense has been so bad in the secondary lately that you got to think they're going to have to pass it. They've been pretty good against the run. Reed's been racking up targets. He had 9 targets. I think he had 6 catches for 92 yards last week. Oh, 96 yards. Sorry, I have that right in front of me. I think he's as good of a value play as there is. I mean, upside-wise, I can't see him getting less than 7-8 targets in this game. So there's a ton to like here against a Philly team that just has not been good against the pass.
Yeah, absolutely. That defense has not looked good at all. GPP plays, you got Jimmy Graham here for the Seahawks. Finally had not quite a Jimmy Graham type of performance, I guess, last week, but certainly encouraging for his prospects coming off a one-catch game against Green Bay. 7 for 83 and a touchdown last week. Obviously, that game against a terrible defense in the Bears, maybe the worst in all of football. This week, though, against a Detroit defense that I feel like people are shying away from them a little bit more than they should because they were so good last year, but missing some key pieces, of course, this year. Really not getting much pressure on the quarterback. I mean, this defense just got absolutely gashed through the air last week. We saw it. What was it? Darius Slay was probably 3 or 4 times just get absolutely manhandled. Yep. I mean, obviously that's a different scenario. He's not going to be matched up with Slay, but I mean, this team in general just looks awful right now, and I certainly don't mind picking on them whenever I can.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel pretty good about Graham. He complained a little bit about his role after week 2. He looked pretty good in week 1, catching a touchdown. He's going to see 8, 9, 10 targets from Russell Wilson, who's been ridiculously accurate. Get some red zone targets. I mean, he's going to be a rock-solid play basically every week. And there's always 2 touchdown upside with a guy in a good offense that, I mean, he's really their only red zone threat in the passing game. Obviously, you got to worry about Lynch and Wilson both running it in themselves. But I mean, at some point, you're going to have to throw passes in the red zone, and he's going to be the guy they're throwing to. They don't have a ton of other length in the red zone in the receiving core.
Yeah, no, not at all. And then next guy you've got here, speaking of Aaron Rodgers, you got Richard Rodgers, the other Rodgers for the Packers. And obviously, you mentioned Andrew Corliss now out for the season. Richard Rodgers really is the only tight end target they have. And I mean, while he hasn't seen a whole lot of volume, did get a touchdown in week 2. And, he's a guy that may see a couple of increased looks, but really as a GPP play, this is the guy that you're looking at, hoping that you catch a touchdown. Because, I mean, the likelihood of him putting up 80, 100 yards is really, really small. So you find him a couple red zone looks, maybe 3, 4 catches, and you're happy at his price tag.
Yeah, right. I mean, his DraftKings price is so low. I mean, you can't even get that low at another position besides tight end. So, like you said, you're looking for red zone targets here, and playing with Aaron Rodgers is always a huge factor in that case. he should play every single play at tight end this week with Corliss on the IR now. Not a massive amount of upside like you mentioned. He's not going to give you a 60-yard touchdown catch unless somebody just like absolutely forgets about him. So his upside's definitely capped a little bit, but definitely a guy that has a good chance at a touchdown any week that he's playing all the snaps at tight end.
Yeah. Anytime you can get a cheap piece of that Aaron Rodgers offense, I'm all about that. Martellus Bennett for the Bears next up. Obviously, last week was a complete debacle for this team. Didn't score a single point. Bennett had 4 catches, but somehow for only 15 yards because, it was the Seahawks and it was Jimmy Clausen. It's just a bad situation. We see now Jay Cutler is expected to sit out this week. It's not official yet, but you assume that he probably will. But
he did practice today, though.
Yeah, so, maybe he plays. Either way, it's a significantly better matchup.
Oh,
almost the opposite side of the entire spectrum from Seattle to Oakland now.
Yeah.
Oakland defense just not a good one at all. So certainly going to be some opportunities for Bennett. And he's a red zone threat. He's the guy that could see volume as well. So I think he makes for a great GPP play, especially if Cutler sits, because I think a lot of people will be off him, but should still see 7-8 targets in this one.
Yeah, definitely. I have him and Jason Witten as almost identical plays this week for the most part. They're really similar in price. They're both probably playing with backup quarterbacks. They're both going to rack up most of their points via catches rather than yardage and touchdowns. So you're looking for like 6 or 7 catches for 50, 60 yards out of both of these guys and hope that they get a touchdown, basically. And that's going to very easily pay off their prices in full PPR for sure. So I like Witten, I think, slightly more just because New Orleans has been really rough in the secondary. And I just feel a little bit better about Brandon Weeden than I do Jimmy Clausen just because he's been there for a little bit longer and he's played with Witten for quite a while. But I don't feel particularly good about either of these guys outside of the fact that they're really cheap and have some nice reception upside.
Yeah, exactly. And then next up we've got Jason Witten, like you mentioned. He's the last guy there. You know the story of Jason Witten, unreliable, and
yep.
Like you said, New Orleans, that defense it's just embarrassing how bad they are right now. And Witten's still seeing a ton of looks, not quite as many red zone looks, of course, but just because the team hasn't been in the red zone a lot. So that certainly could and should change this week. All right, that's going to wrap things up once again. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Check out the rest of our NFL content, MLB content, and college football at dailyfantasycafe.com.